Static or quasi-static loading is rarely observed in modern engineering practice. Consequently, it is essential for the designer to address the implications of repeated loads, fluctuating loads, and rapidly applied loads. By far, the majority of engineering design projects involve machine parts subjected to fluctuating or cyclic loads. Such loading induces fluctuating or cyclic stresses that often result in failure by fatigue. It has been recognized since 1830 that a metal subjected to a repetitive or fluctuating stress will fail at a stress much lower than that required to cause fracture on a single application of load. Failures occurring under conditions of dynamic loading are called fatigue failures, presumably because it is generally observed that these failures occur only after a considerable period of service. Fatigue has become progressively more prevalent as technology has developed a greater amount of equipment such as automobile, aircraft, compressors, pumps, turbines, etc., subject to repeated loading and vibration. Until today, it has often stated that fatigue accounts for at least 90% of all service failures due to mechanical causes. Three basic factors are necessary to cause fatigue failure. They are: number one, maximum tensile stress of sufficiently high value; number two, a large number of variations, fluctuation in the applied stress; and number three, a sufficiently large number of cycles of the applied stress. In addition, there are a host of other variables such as stress concentration, corrosion, temperature, overload, metallurgical structure, residual stresses, and combined stresses which tend to alter the conditions for fatigue. Fatigue fractures are generally considered the most serious type of fractures in machinery parts simply because fatigue fractures can and do occur in normal service without excessive overloads and under normal operating conditions. Fatigue fractures are serious because they are insidious, that is, they are frequently sneaky and can occur without warning that anything is amiss. Obviously, if service is abnormal as a result of excessive overloading, corrosive environment, or other conditions, the possibility of fatigue fracture is increased. Fatigue fractures are progressive. That is, it begins as a minute crack that grows under fluctuating stress. It is well established that there are three stages of fatigue fracture, namely initiation, propagation, and a final rupture. Indeed, this is the way that most authors refer to fatigue fracture because it helps to simplify a subject that can become exceedingly complex. Initiation is the most complex stage of fatigue fracture and is the stage most rigorously studied by researchers. Obviously, if this stage can be prevented, there can be no fatigue fracture. The most significant factor about the initiation stage of the fatigue fracture is that the irreversible changes in the metal are caused by repetitive shear stresses. The adjoining figure shows schematically these microstructural changes that occur in the crystal lattice because of the shearing or sliding stresses that are repetitively imposed on the structure. The figure at the top left. The figure at the top left shows an edge dislocation caused by edge dislocation shown by inverted T. So here is the inverted T. The edge dislocation is present at this location. With the single application of stress, of sufficiently large magnitude from the left side, the dislocation jumps one cell to the right, and with the next application of stress, it jumps further to the right. So in this figure, we see that the stress is applied from the left hand side. So the edge dislocation which was present over here, it moves or it jumps one unit cell to the right, and with subsequent application of the stresses, it further jumps to the right. And finally, to the edge of the crystalline structure. So here in the last figure, we see it has reached to the edge of the crystalline structure. When the action is going on in many other crystals, the dislocation eventually joins to form microscopic cracks. This is stage 1 in the fatigue process. A single load application makes little change, but the cumulative effect of thousands or millions of load applications make micro changes. Although each is insignificant by itself, they accumulate to cause very significant alterations in a few or many crystals that can lead to fatigue fracture. Indeed, the accumulation of micro changes over a large number of load applications result in what is called as cumulative damage. Initiation site of a given fatigue fracture never extends beyond 2 to 5 grains around the region. At the location of severe stress concentration, the initiation site may be extremely small and difficult to differentiate from the succeeding stage of propagation. One must be aware that there can be any number of these initiation sites. The number depends on the geometry of the part, environment, stress, metallurgical and strength conditions. Propagation. As repetitive loading continues, the direction of the tiny crack changes from parallel to the shear stress direction to perpendicular to the tensile stress direction. It is necessary to recall that ductile behavior is caused by shear stress components, whereas brittle behavior is caused by tensile stress components of the stress system. The first or initiation stage of fatigue causes a microcrack parallel to the shear stress component, while the second or the propagation stage of fatigue fracture causes the microcrack to change direction and grow perpendicular to the tensile stress. This is the same direction as taken by a brittle fracture. Although fatigue is caused by a different mechanism and by a much larger number of load applications than is a single load brittle fracture. Because the second or the propagation stage of fatigue is usually the most readily identifiable area of fatigue fracture, it is necessary to briefly mention how the fracture progresses across the section. After the original crack is formed, it becomes an extremely sharp stress concentration that tends to drive the crack ever deeper into the metal with each tensile stress application. Assuming that the maximum cyclic stress is of a magnitude high enough to propagate the crack. The local stress at the tip of the crack is extremely high because of the sharp notch, and with each crack opening, the depth of the crack advances by one striation under many, but not all circumstances. Striations are very tiny, closely spaced ridges that identify the tip of the crack at some time. Striations are normally visible only at high magnification with the aid of an electron microscope. Final rupture. As the propagation of the fatigue crack continues, gradually reducing the cross-sectional area of the part or test specimen, it eventually weakens the part so greatly that finally complete fracture can occur with only one more load application. This is stage 3 or the final rupture. From technical standpoint, this is the stage in fatigue fracture that is easiest to understand. Actually, the stage 3 is not fatigue at all because the fracture mode may be either ductile, that is with a dimpled fracture surface, or brittle, that is with a cleavage or perhaps even intergranular fracture surface, or any combination thereof depending on factors such as the metal concerned, the stress level and the environment. However, the failure analyst must pay careful attention to the size, shape and location of the final rupture area because it can greatly assist in understanding the relation between the stresses on the part and the strength of the part. They can also indicate imbalance and non-uniform stresses. Now, let us try to understand the microscopic characteristics of fatigue fracture. And the first characteristic is the striation. Striations are the most characteristic microscopic evidence of fatigue fracture. Although striations may not always be present on fatigue fracture surfaces. During stage 2, the crack propagation stage of a fatigue fracture, the tip of the crack is an extremely sharp notch or stress concentration. The figure displayed here is a schematic representation of the crack tip. Actually, it can be considered to be an infinitely sharp for it has zero radius at the tip. However, each time the crack is opened by a tensile stress of sufficient magnitude, the crack tip deforms plastically, slightly blunting the tip on a microscopic scale, which then causes the fracture to advance, creating a tiny ridge or striation on each of the mating fracture surfaces. This is shown schematically in the adjoining figure. So here in the figure we see the curved lines at the top represent these curved lines at the top represent the ridges on the upper mating surface, and the curved lines and these lower curved lines represent the ridges on the lower mating surfaces. If the maximum cyclic stress or maximum cyclic load remains constant, the striations near the fatigue origin are extremely small and are closely spaced, and as the crack grows at a slow rate because the part is still quite strong. So here we see in this figure these striations, they are very closely spaced. Here somewhere is the origin, okay, and these striations are closely spaced, and further apart they are widely spaced. However, as the crack gradually propagates, the spacing between the striations increases and the crack grows at an increasingly rapid rate because the crack greatly weakens the section. Eventually, complete fracture, that is stage 3, and separation occur. The figure on the left shows fatigue striations in low carbon alloy steels SAE 8620. This scanning electron microscope fractography shows the rough horizontal ridges which are the advance of the crack front with each load application. The crack progresses in the direction of the arrow. So here is the arrow and the crack is progressing in the direction of the arrow. The figure on the right side shows fatigue striations formed as a result of spectrum loading in a laboratory test of aluminium alloy 7075T6. In this test, the specimen was loaded 10 cycles at a high stress, then 10 at lower stress, and alternated with these stresses as the fatigue crack continued to propagate. This produced 10 large striations, then 10 small striations alternately across the fractured surface. So here again we see the 10 large uh, striations followed by 10 small striations, again 10 large striations likewise. While interpreting the fractured surface for fatigue fracture, the failure analysts need to be cautious. Striations are usually not present on very hard or very soft metals. Hardened steels over about 50 HRC develop either poorly formed or no striations, probably because of their lack of ductility. As hardness increases, striations are more difficult to observe, often resulting in fractured surfaces that appear to be featureless. At the opposite end of the hardness scale, extremely soft metals and weak metals do not form good striations either, probably because their low strength makes them vulnerable to damage. The figures shown here are the examples of poorly formed striations at the extremes of the strength level. Figure on the left shows poorly formed striations on the fractured surface of D6AC steel. D6AC steel is a vacuum melted medium carbon low alloyed steels and ultra high strength steel. This grade is used for high strength applications like aircraft structures. With proper tempering, yield strength and hardness of this grade can reach up to 1750 MPa and 53 HRC respectively. The right hand side figure shows the fractured surface of aluminium alloy 1100. 1100 is one of the widest used alloys with excellent forming properties in annealed states and is suitable for bending, spinning, drawing, stamping, roll forming and many other applications. Typically, it has a yield strength of 13 KSI and an elongation of 30%. Both these surfaces show poorly formed striations. Marks resembling striations caused by rubbing or other post-fracture damage may produce parallel ridges that may erroneously be considered as striations. This kind of marks may occur when opposite sides of the fatigue fracture rub against each other during compression loading of a crack. For example, a shaft in a rotating bending has a tensile stress at one position, that is the convex side of the rotating member, while on the opposite, that is the concave side, the compressive stresses tends to rub any existing crack surfaces together. So here in the figure shown over here, we can see these are the rub marks which may be erroneously considered as the striations. Another precaution one has to take in dealing with microscopic characteristics of fatigue fracture is the caution in interpretation. The lamellar microstructures as perlite in the fractured surface may resemble striations. However, one clear difference is there. The orientation of lamellar structure varies from one location to another, whereas platelets may appear to penetrate into surrounding structure. The two striations are generally concentric around the origin and the striations do not cross each other. The figures shown here are that of the piston for a gun recoil mechanism sand cast from ductile iron grade D7003 that was thought to be fractured by fatigue because of the vermicularity of graphite. Because some of the pistons exhibited regions with an appearance suggesting fatigue, ACM factographs were prepared to attempt to locate fatigue striations and to estimate the number of cycles to failure. These factographs showed configurations similar in appearances to fatigue striations, but it was concluded that they were perlite lamellae because the spacing agreed with the perlite dimensions observed in optical microscopes. Scanning electron microscope views of the area of final fracture revealed dimples in some region and features resembling cleavage facets in others. However, what appeared to be facets may have been interfaces of perlite lamellae oriented nearly parallel to the direction of crack propagation. A tremendous amount of information can be learned about a fatigue fracture with only macroscopic examination, that is, study with the unaided eye and relatively low magnification up to perhaps 20 to 50x is usually the most important single way to study and analyze fatigue fractures. In most cases, it is not necessary to exceed 15 or 20x magnification. The first and the most important feature is the lack of deformation. Because initiation of fatigue fracture does not require high stress, there is usually little or no deformation in a part or specimen that is fractured by fatigue. If the maximum stress did not exceed the yield strength, that is the elastic limit, there is no gross plastic or permanent deformation, although the final rupture region may have some obvious macroscopic deformation. However, if the part has been subjected to repeated high stress, low cycle load applications, there may be deformation depending on the stress strength relationship. An example of this is the permanent deformation in a paper clip or wire coat hanger fractured by fatigue in a relatively small number of extremely high stress bending applications. Strictly speaking, this is fatigue because more than one stress application was required for fracture. However, this is not the typical fatigue fracture that occurs in most load-bearing parts, which have relatively low stress, high cycle loading. The second most important macroscopic feature of fatigue failure are the beach marks. Beach marks are a unique feature found in many fatigue fractures, and their presence is a positive means of identifying fatigue fractures. Beach marks also have been called stop marks, arrest marks, clamshell marks, and conchoidal marks, all in an attempt to describe their origin or characteristic appearance. The term beach marks is the most commonly used term. Beach marks appear to be formed in three major ways. Number one, microscopic plastic deformation at the tip of the fatigue crack during rest period or when cyclic stress is not enough to make the fatigue crack progress. Number two, differences in the time of corrosion in the propagation of fatigue crack, and number three, large changes in the magnitude of loading frequency. Friends, let us now try to understand how each of the three ways mentioned earlier give rise to the beach marks. The figure shows the crack progressing from left to right, and there is a highly strained zone at the tip of the advancing fatigue crack. So let's see over here. So the crack is progressing from left to right, and at the tip of the crack, this is the tip of the crack. So here there is a highly strained zone because of the plastic deformation that is present over here. At rest for a period of time, this region appears to strengthen by work hardening all along the crack tip. Then, when normal fatigue stressing continues, this strengthened region acts as a temporary barrier to further progression. However, the crack soon breaks through this barrier and the normal fatigue process of striation formation continues. This process results in this barrier or a strengthened region appearing as a microscopic ridge or mark on the fractured surface. In effect, it is a giant striation. The second reason behind the formation of beach marks is differences in the time of corrosion in the propagating fatigue crack. The area near the origin or origins is exposed to environment longer than any other portion of the progressing fatigue crack. Sometimes these differences in corrosion form concentric rings or lines emanating from the origins. In some metals and environment, the corrosion products are of different color from that of the uncorroded metal near the final rupture. This color contrast frequently is of help in determining the location and number of fatigue origins. However, if one or both fractured surfaces suffer from uniform corrosion after the final fracture, then the differences may be obliterated by the presence of more uniform corrosion products over the entire surfaces. In some cases, it may be possible to clean carefully the uniform corrosion products from the fractured surfaces and reveal the underlying contrast. However, the cleaning also may remove the underlying corrosion products if it is performed too vigorously. In any case, compare both fracture surfaces if both are available to determine the differences in the corrosion patterns. The third macroscopic characteristic of fatigue are the ratchet marks. The term ratchet marks is used to describe features that are useful in identification of fatigue fractures and in locating and counting the number of fatigue origins. These marks are essentially perpendicular to the surface from which fatigue crack originate. Therefore, in circular shaft-like parts, the ratchet marks are essentially radial, pointing towards the center. Let us now try to understand how the ratchet marks are formed. When several fatigue origins are adjacent to each other, each will start its own fatigue crack propagating. If the origins are roughly in the same plane, the fatigue crack growing from one origin will start to overlap the fatigue crack from another origin. Figure A shows two cracks, crack A and crack B, with different origins. So here we see crack A and crack B having two different origins. They are originating from the peripheral surface of a circular shaft and they are propagating towards the center. And here, after propagating certain distance, they overlap each other. So the figure is the top view of the fracture plane. The figure B shows that the two cracks are in the same plane. These two cracks overlap after propagating certain distance. So here we see the crack A and crack B, they are in the same plane. This is the front view of the fractured part taken at section 1. This is the section 1 over here. When adjacent cracks overlap, the metal in the overlap area will then fracture across the short distance between the two cracks. This in-between fracturing creates a corner angle perpendicular to the surface of the part as shown in figure C. So now let us see figure C. This is the figure C. This is again the front view of the fractured surface, but it is taken at section 2. So here at the overlap zone, this is the overlap zone. This section is taken at the overlap zone. At the overlap zone, we see a step being formed in where the cracks or propagating cracks overlap. This is called as the ratchet. It is perpendicular to the fractured surface. The ratchet marks are not the origins themselves. Each ratchet mark separates two adjacent fatigue fractures. As the crack becomes deeper, the cracks from each origin tend to grow together and become essentially one fatigue fracture that has numerous origins. The number of ratchet marks equals or is 1 less than the number of origins. Thus, recognition of the number of ratchet marks is important in determining the number of origins. So friends, to summarize, up till now we have studied what is fatigue, the microscopic and macroscopic features of fatigue. The microscopic features are the striations. The macroscopic features include beach marks and ratchet marks.